Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Turpeau, and welcome to the Dr. Turpeau Show. In this show, I actually interview people who are very successful and inspiring, and I think it's very motivational. For me, there's nothing more motivational than inspiring than people's stories. As I talk to people in my practice and just through my everyday life, I talk to people and I ask them about their story, and I think it is one of the most inspirational things that we can have is people's stories, and we chronicle them, and it can be a guide for us to live life in a long, productive, and prosperous lives ourselves. So I'm excited about today. We have a very noted musician, educator, and composer, Dr. Thomas T.J. Anderson, and we're getting ready to jump into an interview with him. So I'm really looking forward today to this interview. But before we do that, I just want to invite people to, if you like this video, please click the like button. And also, please share this video. What's the use of hearing this story and being inspired yourself without sharing it with others? So please pass this inspirational story on to others as well. So, and as always, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. All right, well, thank you very much. And without further ado, we will jump into the interview today. And that is, who is Thomas T.J. Anderson. So, hello, TJ. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Dr. Turpeau.
All right. I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you very much. So I'm excited to find out more about your story. So let's just start off from the beginning. That's always a good place to start, the prelude. So let's ask you this. So tell us a little bit about where did you grow up? What was it like for you growing up as a kid?
Well, I grew up in a lot of places. Of course, being a Turpeau, you know all this.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, where I was born. Then my father was on the faculty at Howard University. We lived there. Then I moved back to Coatesville. And from Coatesville, I moved to Cincinnati. And then I went back to Coatesville.
Mm.
And then I went on to college, to West Virginia State College.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Very good. So tell us a little bit more. What was it like for you growing up, childhood, high school years before you went to college? What was life like back then?
Well, it was basically segregated. Everything was black. Even the college I went to. The high school in Coatesville was not segregated, but everything else was segregated. So I had the good fortune to have teachers that cared and supported me in my musical efforts. And I think I can say I enjoyed growing up. I really enjoyed growing up. But there was a turning point in my life. I got interested in jazz. And of course, to hear jazz, you have to stay out late at night and hang out in clubs. This my mother never understood. So as fortune would have it, my sister failed. I failed 7th grade.
Wow. Okay.
My sister was in the 6th grade and she moved up to 7th. So rather than have me embarrassed being in the same level as my sister, my parents sent me to live with my grandparents. And of course, my grandfather, your great-grandfather, was a member of the legislature and a famous preacher in Cincinnati. So therefore, they enabled me to get into the 8th grade.
Very good.
So when I got in the 8th grade at Stowe School, where your grandfather taught, I was fortunate that I met Charles Keyes, and he actually helped me with my musical efforts. But more important than that, my grandmother allowed me to stay out all night and listen to band.
Wow, that was great. That was great. So that was,
well,
go ahead.
The interesting thing was that she knew everybody in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. And she would see a man and she'd say, what is my grandson doing in that club all night at the Cotton Club? And Sister Turpeau, you don't have to worry about him. All that boy does is sit in front of the band all night long. So once she heard that, she could relax and she know that I was listening to music. So that was a point in my life.
Very good. That sounds like a very good turning point. And it was great that you were able to have that exposure at that age.
Well, it was interesting because jazz has always been a vital part of the Black community. So I got to hear all the great jazz musicians. And And not only that, I was playing at the time, so it also reinforced what I was doing.
So what were you playing? What instrument?
I was playing trumpet. I'd been playing violin before that. And of course, I lived in a neighborhood where it's better to switch than keep the same instrument. So I switched to the trumpet, and I stayed with the trumpet until after college, and then I played a little bit. And when on my first teaching job, which was in High Point, North Carolina, after I got a master's from Penn State, I had a band. It was with Jackie McLean, who later on played with Mingus, and also Danny Richmond, the drummer with Mingus. So the three of us had a band that practiced all the time and never performed, you know.
Wow.
But it learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from that experience.
So now tell us, you mentioned West Virginia State. That's a HBCU. Tell us a little bit more about what was that like for you at West Virginia State?
West Virginia State was a wonderful school. And of course, I went there as your father did, in that we had a family tradition. Our uncles and aunts went there. So we had a number of relatives that went there. And my sister went there also. And the great thing about that school is that it had a fantastic president, John W. Davis, and it also had an excellent music department, Armin Williams. And the man that really inspired a lot of my work in music was Dr. E.C. Lewis, who was in the music department as band director. He later went to Tennessee State. And after I was chair of the department in Langston University, I joined him in Nashville at Tennessee State and was on his faculty for a number of years.
Oh, wow. Very good, very good. So now, right after West Virginia State, what did you do next? Did you go straight to school?
Well, when I went to Penn State to get my master's degree, then I went to teach. And then I went to the University of Iowa. I decided I needed a doctorate. And in the process, I got married to Lois Fields Anderson in Cincinnati, of course.
Oh, okay.
And
well, I tell you what, if it wasn't for Lois Anderson, we wouldn't have DTJ Anderson today.
What? we have TJ, my father.
Yeah. I'm
a junior. TJ is the third. But what you forget is that Isla, my sister, married a TJ Prince.
All right.
And he had a son named So at one time there were 5 TJs, and we could tell if they said TJ, with respect and admiration, that was my father, TJ. that was me.
You could tell by the intonation.
Tell by the inflection.
Yeah. So very good, very good. So you all got married and started your family life, and you are going to graduate school. And so now you graduated in 1958. Was that your doctorate or?
Yeah, that was 58. 58 was the bachelor's. Wait, okay. I can't. PhD was 58. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And that was a good school. In fact, I went to Iowa because Iowa had a reputation for creativity, and they had a number of Black graduates. I wouldn't have chosen it. I mean, if it didn't have Black graduates, I knew that they knew Black. They had faith in Black intellect. So good. I chose that because of that, and it was a perfect school for me because emphasis on classical literature. And they taught me how to analyze music. So I was very fortunate. I enjoyed that. Very good. And so you graduated. And so what happened next? After we left Iowa, we went to Tennessee State. Is that right? Oh, no, we went to Langston. We went to Langston, Oklahoma. Okay. And we were there for a number of years. I enjoyed that because I met a conductor of the Oklahoma City Symphony, Guy Fraser Harrison. I went to see him one day and I said, I want a performance. And he said, so do they. And he started pointing to all these scores. He said, you know, Howard Hanson and all these scores. He started naming all these composers. I said, look, I got my own problems. I can't worry about them. And he said, all right, write me a 3-minute piece. I wrote him a 10-minute piece, and he looked at it and he performed it. And he said, I'll perform anything you write. So that was a tremendous breakthrough for me. He was very, very supportive.
Very good, very good. Now, it's interesting, you know, for a lot of people, they're surprised to see that someone accomplished like you, a Black musician into symphonic and music and classical music. Tell us a little bit about your evolution in music as far as moving from jazz over into the classical symphony realm.
Well, it started as a child. My mother took me, and she used to always tell this story. She took me to the Watergate to see an opera.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Mozart opera.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I asked her, I was a child then, she said, Mother, is that what they do dressed when they had the minuet in G? And she said, everybody looked startled. And here's a little Black boy know something about the minuet in G. You know, it was just unheard of. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was studying also with Louis Vaughan Jones. Now, Louis Vaughan Jones was a violinist, mm-hmm. a classical violinist who studied in Germany and had no chance of being a concert artist here. Mm-hmm. So he was teaching at Howard. And he was Louis Jones when he left. He had to study in Germany. And he came back, Louis Vaughan Jones, when he came back to the United States. And he was a marvelous teacher. And one of the interesting things about my studies with him is that I learned to play by ear. And wow. So every lesson that I was going to take the following week, he would play for me. So I never practiced. I just come back and play it by ear.
Wow. That's interesting.
So one week he said, don't have time to play it for you. Then he found out I couldn't read. So he had to start all over again. But he was very gracious, and I learned a lot from him.
Okay. What was it like in your industry, in the music industry, being a Black man, and especially being a Black man going into the classical realm? What was it like?
Well, I wasn't aware because I had several models. I had William Graham Still and William Dawson, both are friends of mine too. I might admit later. And they, in other words, my whole career was based on previous experiences. So those two, along with Hale, Smith, and Ulysses K., they sort of prepared me for everything to expect. But all four of my marvelous composers never got the due credit. Still has, but because he's referred to as the Dean of African American Composers. And after he died, nobody would take that spot because they knew it was a Black position, you know. and I was indeed fortunate that these four musicians were like trailblazers. They paved the way for me to come, and I hope I paved the way for other musicians to come.
Yes, definitely. So now we left off as far as your chronology. You were at Tennessee State. And what time period was this then that you were at Tennessee State?
Well, before I went to Tennessee State, I was at Langston.
Okay.
And I met a man that really inspired me is the poet M.B. Tolson. And I was like a member of his family. And I certainly learned a lot about him, about politics, Black life, about everything. And not just being an artist, I became much more aware of what my role was, what I was supposed to do, and my responsibility to the Black community through M.B. Tolson and his poetry. I said a piece called A Very Easy Going Theme by M.B. Tolson, which was performed at the Library of Congress and later recorded, and that was dedicated to Lois, my wife. And his poetry is just way ahead of his time, and I still marvel at his intellect, his vocabulary, his wisdom and the influence that he had. In fact, the artist Chuck Young used to say, "Tolson is your Jesus," because I'd always be quoting Tolson, you know. And in many ways, I mean, I wouldn't compare him to Jesus, but I'd compare him with certainly a major inspiration with my life.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so and then from Nashville, where'd you go next?
From Nashville, we went to Atlanta. I was invited by Robert Shaw to be a resident composer. I was the first successful Black composer to be resident with a major orchestra, and I learned so much from Shaw. He was certainly another inspiration in my life. His sense of dedication, his ability as a conductor. Now, Robert Shaw never got credit for being the great conductor that he was. In other words, the typical route for a conductor is to be assistant to a major conductor like George Zell in Cleveland, and Levine did this, and then he went to the Met Opera. But with Shaw, Shaw had his own route. He went with Fred Waring, and then he went with popular music in New York and Broadway and Billy Rose, and he came through the back door. But what Shaw knew was that regardless of what you had in music, it's all based on the sound and motion and direction. And most conductors don't know this. I mean, they know how to conduct and they know how to go fast or go slow. But Shaw instinctively knew that, and that's what made him a major conductor. I could tell you Shaw stories all day. I'll tell you one.
Yeah.
When I was in residence at Yaddo, Saratoga Springs, New York, there was a summer home in the Philadelphia Orchestra. They were playing a Beethoven Sixth Symphony. And after the performance, as usual, I used to always go backstage with Robert in the studio after every concert. The principal oboist came rushing back, and he said, "Maestro, I've played the symphony under practically every major conductor in the world." And he said, "You were the first one to tell me how that passage made sense." Now, for him to tell Shaw that, and he'd been playing this symphony, he said, high school, conservatory, everywhere, all the major conductors with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and here's a conductor telling him something that nobody else saw. Wow. How a passage made sense and how it fit into the movement.
Wow.
I mean, and that's just one of many, I'll tell you, but he was special. He was indeed special.
It intrigues me, and it makes me engaged when I hear you talk about music, because I can tell it's your passion. And when I think about music, it just, when I'm stressed, that's one of my major things that helps me therapeutically is to put on some music. A lot of times, depending on what your mood is, that type of thing. But what amazes me about music, as we were joking a little bit before we got started about how it's the international language, music seems to be, no matter, it doesn't necessarily have to be religious music or anything. It just seems to be very spiritual to me. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think about music? What philosophy, what are some of your ideas about music in general?
Well, I as a composer, I want to reach an audience, and I have a small audience. I don't have a large audience. And I used to feel bad about that until I met the poet Phil Levine, who's a friend of mine and the poet laureate of the country. And Phil told me, he said, I have about 300 readers. Now that means that he'll sell more than 300 books, but he meant that these 300 people will always show up to buy his books. And that's what I try to create an audience, and I think I have one. It's small, but I have one that want to hear what I have to say. I remember I had a piece performed at a concert by Atlanta Symphony and Robert Shaw, and there was a little black kid who was in the audience, And the first half was all this classical music. He slept through the first half. The second half, this kid woke up and was awake all the way through my piece. And I said, I got something going. I knew at that moment that I was speaking to him.
Right.
And I knew that I had an audience, and I knew that this kid who knew little or nothing about music was on the same page that I was on, because he stayed awake the whole time. So that you get those signals that what you're doing are correct, and you just go on. As a teacher, I used to always teach my students that you are a majority of one. In other words, you don't care what anybody thinks. It's your job to do what you want to do, the way you want to do it. And if people accept it, fine. If people don't accept it, that's fine too. But you have a message to deliver, and it's up to you to deliver this message.
Okay, very good. That's excellent. That's excellent. So you came to Atlanta. This is, when was this, the 60s, or when you came to Atlanta, or when was this?
The 70s, in the 70s. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the big things that happened on my third year in Atlanta, I was a Danforth professor at Morehouse. And at that time, we did Scott Joplin's opera Treemonisha. Now, most people know about Scott Joplin, and they know of Treemonisha vaguely. But this was the first performance we did world premiere with Catherine Dunham and a lot of Wendell Whalum, a lot of other people. And what people, and I later found out that this is the first indigenous opera ever written in this country. Wow. In other words, what I'm saying is that American opera starts with Joplin. I remember I was speaking to the Society for American Music in Charlotte. And I said, repeat after me. And I said, Scott Joplin. They said, Scott Joplin, his father is the father of American indigenous opera. And they said that, and I said, see, white folks, it wasn't that bad to say, was it? but whites refused to recognize that American opera starts Scott Joplin. And if you don't believe it, you have to read Edward Berlin's book, The King of Ragtime, and it has a whole chapter devoted how Joplin set out to write an American opera. Fantastic, fantastic, way ahead of his time.
Wow, excellent. Okay, and then so you were here in Atlanta, and you did Treemonisha. I remember that was a big to-do when that was going on. I remember that in our family. So, and then your Atlanta years, when did you leave Atlanta? What was the next chapter in your life?
Well, the next chapter was my going to Tufts, being chairman of the department there. And I think I was the first African-American to head a major music department in a predominantly white university. And I loved Tufts. I mean, I had a great time. They left me alone, wanted me to write music. I got tenure and all that kind of stuff, and endowed chair. I mean, they were very good to me, and they were very supportive. In fact, there's one of my colleagues now writing a book about my career, John McDonald at Tufts, and he's almost through it now. But I was very fortunate to have found Tufts because it enabled me to teach African-American music theory, of course. And I had wonderful colleagues and very supportive. And my wife and I were fortunate that we had good schools to send our children to. And in fact, I have to tell this story. I didn't have a penny when I left Atlanta, and because being a composing resident is not much money. So we went to Tufts, and the local community got up. They had a committee for an open Winchester, and they got up the down payment for my house and did it, and I paid it back at 1%.
Oh, excellent.
And they were glad to see me, and I was glad to see them. And it was a good experience, but it taught me a lesson, you know, that there are people in the world that believe in integration. There are people in the world that want to see changes made, and in spite of setbacks, we still continue to rise.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So now you mentioned Lois and your children. What was it like? You've been a very successful family man yourself, and what was it like going through your career and trying to be during that time and in your industry, trying to balance career and family and all those things? What was that like for you?
Oh, it was great. I never could get a performance from the Boston Symphony, although I conducted the Boston Symphony, Boston Pop several times. I may not have been the only black conductor they have had. And Boston is a community that has so many chamber groups. So I immediately linked up with Dick Pittman and Boston Music of Viva. So that gave me an outlet. So I just constantly wrote for this chamber group, and that was my outlet through most of my Boston career. It was very fortunate because I was able to grow during that period. So.
Okay, very good, very good. Now, also, now did you have some type of working relationship with other? I think I remember reading somewhere you did something with Yo-Yo Ma as well. You worked with him a little bit.
Well, Yo-Yo Ma was a relative, a neighbor rather, of mine in Winchester at the time. Then he later moved to Cambridge, but Yo-Yo Ma commissioned me to do a piece for cello and piano. It's recorded, incidentally. It's, I can't even remember the title of the piece. It's like shit that how you get the things, you know. but we've been friends ever since. In fact, in the book on me, he's written an introduction to that book.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay. Any advice that you have as we wrap up here? Do you have any advice for any future composers, educators, musicians? Any advice you want to give them to hopefully be as successful and prolific as you have been?
Well, the only advice I can give, and this is not just to blacks, it's all minorities, people that the system is rigged against them.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I say don't listen to what they have to say about you, but you will find support and have to be willing to work hard. And if you work hard and are earnest in your efforts, you will succeed. And I think most people choose a career based on the money. How much does it pay? I remember when I was advisor of freshmen at Tufts, the first thing the student would say when they came in, I want to go to John Hopkins Medical School. First year, you know. I said, you don't have education yet, you know, and you talk about going to John Hopkins, you know, or Harvard, you know. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, get an education and stay in school as long as they let you stay, because the more you stay in school, the more you learn. And once you continue to learn after you get out of school, that's when you begin to grow into your own personality. So I would say, don't be afraid of hard work. Don't listen to people that say no. In fact, I have to tell you the story of my mother in kindergarten. The teacher told my mother, said, Mrs. Anderson, you'll be lucky if this boy finishes junior high school.
Wow.
And came home and cried. She just said, I can't stand it. My son not going to finish high school, you know, junior high. But I mean, people, and she was black. I mean, that had nothing to do with race. So right. I'm saying people will tell you all kinds of things why you can't do anything. But if you believe in yourself, and this is very important, you have to believe in yourself. That's first. If you believe in yourself and you're willing to work, you'll find support. You'll find the money to get it done. You're not going to make a lot of money. I'll tell you that now. If you stick to your dreams and do something creatively, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
But if you stick to your dreams and do what you want to do in life, then you'll be successful.
Amen. Man, I couldn't say anything else to top that. I mean, that is a great way to finish up. I want to thank you so much This is famous music composer, musician, educator, and my cousin, Dr. Thomas T.J. Anderson. So I really appreciate your time, TJ, and I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm sure people will definitely click on this video and be inspired by it. So thank you so much again.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Yes, one more thing. Go ahead.
One more thing. Please, people, see the interview with Aaron Turpeau Sr.
Okay.
Marvelous lesson in terms of political action and how to grow in a big city. It's a marvelous interview. That's it.
Thank you very much. Yes, definitely watch these other interviews as well, especially this one. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you, sir.
All right. Love y'all. Take care.
Love you.